What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. I'm your host, Gavin J. Gallagher, and on this podcast, I explore the mental and emotional game often playing out subconsciously both in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behavior, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and, most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. What's up, guys? Welcome back to a new year, and this is the first week of January, and I just thought I've got a bit of a tickly throat, so you might hear my voice is a little bit rough, but thought I would check in with you guys and start the year off with just a bit of a chat about the last couple of days and just what to expect in 2024. So, new season, as I mentioned before in the last one. This is season 5 of the podcast, and there's a lot going on, lots to talk about. And one of the things that happened in the last few days, like I always love to start a new year with a plan. And what I usually do is in the last couple of days before the new year, I'll sit down and I'll start formulating plans and I'll start working out things. And I have a framework that I use for this. And what I've gone and done, some of you will be aware, I've created a thing that I'm calling momentum. And that is the framework that I use to plan out the year and specifically the next 3 months. That is something that I'm now doing as a kind of an accountability group and a kind of coaching program. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about, I sat down on Monday morning, and it was the new year, and we were up a bit late because we had a bit of a party the night before, and got up and went and had a look outside my window, and there was an ambulance pulled up across the street. And now you may hear in the background, I have a couple of kids running around the house going absolutely crazy. We went and visited some relatives today, and they gave them chocolate, which is, if anyone has seen the movie Gremlins, where you feed the gremlins after midnight and they turn into these kind of beasts. Well, that is effectively what happens to children when you feed them chocolate. And so that is exactly what I'm dealing with here. So I'm trying to make this podcast with all the roaring going on behind me. But getting back to the story, and I'm trying to keep it light, but there is something kind of dark to talk about. And what I found was we have got a neighbor, this new estate that we've moved into. I look out on a couple of apartments across the way, and an ambulance pulled up outside one of them on New Year's Day. And I was like, oh, that's not good. Geez, I hope somebody's okay. And I wanted to go on one of my big, huge kind of runs where I run up to the top of the lead mines in the mountain and I kind of take some nice photographs. And I did that. I took off and went for this big, long run. I ended up going out for about 2.5 hours. But when I came back, there was a police car, a Garda car parked outside the house. And there was also what looked like the coroner was there. And so it suddenly dawned on me that, whoa, this person, whatever's happened, somebody has actually died. And so it was pretty sobering because, you spend New Year's Eve in this kind of party mode and you're kind of celebrating and drinking champagne and all of this kind of stuff. Now, in my case, it's non-alcohol champagne, but all of this stuff is going on. And the next morning, then you get this sobering reality that some poor soul has died during the night or whatever. And so really awful sort of wake-up call. And anyway, I went off on my run, came back, discovered this. And then I was sitting down with the family. And when something like that happens, you reconnect with your values. And you start, I was chatting to my family. I was happy to be there with them. And we thought, let's go and put on a nice Christmas movie and let's sit down together as a family. And then my phone rang, and it was my own mother, and she was in a terrible distressed state. She had fallen ill very, very suddenly. Like making a cup of tea, everything's fine. Suddenly, dizziness, very sudden onset of dizziness, and suddenly she's nauseous, throwing up, feeling terrible. So she called me, and all I could hear was, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble here, help." And so I dropped everything, rushed out to her house. And when I got to the house, I actually had to break in. I didn't have a key to get in, and I couldn't get her attention, or I wasn't sure what was going on. And so I had to break in to my mother's house. I had to kick in the window and climb in through the bathroom window. And anyway, I'm not going to go into the details, but sure enough, my mother needed hospitalization. And so I had to organize an ambulance. The ambulance arrived, jumped into it. And I was thinking to myself, obviously you're not thinking like this at the time, but I had made these plans to kind of sit down and, create some content, write maybe a blog post for the new year or whatever it is. And then suddenly here I am sitting in an ambulance with my poor mother. And it really kind of came home just how things can happen. There is an old saying that man plans and God laughs. And it kind of reminds us that it doesn't matter what your plans are, shit happens effectively. And what you may not like it, but you are on autopilot going through life, and you think that everything is going to happen according to your plan and your set intentions. And then you suddenly realize that, wait, the universe has a different plan. And suddenly you're in a situation that you had absolutely no inkling that it was coming. And one of the reasons that I'm bringing this up is because when it comes to, obviously this is an investment podcast. And when it comes to an investment, a lot of the time, people come up with an investment hypothesis. They believe that the market's going up or the market's going down, or interest rates are going up or they're going down, or whatever your hypothesis. You might have an absolutely perfectly developed investment hypothesis. You might be absolutely spot on, but events can take place. Now, I've mentioned before the 4 E's, and the 4 E's are the 4 things that can take you down, take your career down as an investor. And number 1 is your ego. Number 2 is your emotions. Number 3 is the economy. And then number 4, I've always reserved number 4 for the event, the unexpected, unanticipated, random event that can take place. And over the years, I've experienced this. But these events, they are potentially life-threatening. They're potentially, certainly they can change your life. But more importantly, the market, or the general consumer economy and consumer confidence can be greatly shaken by this. So the first example to use would be March, April of 2020, COVID. If you started January in 2020, as I did, I was writing out plans. It was a new decade. It was the 1st of January 2020, brand new decade ahead. What are we going to achieve in the next 10 years? It was a massive day. And I made all these great plans. And then 3 months later, we're in full lockdown with something like, was it 2 kilometers was the distance that you could go out of your home and stuff? I mean, totally unexpected. If you had even suggested it was possible 3 months earlier, you would have been called a complete idiot. And so it just shows you. Another event that took place, certainly in my memory, that stands out is September 11th, 2001. And when the towers were hit in New York City by the planes. And those are kind of big, historic, kind of global things. But you can also have events that are much more local to you. So, for example, the death of a relative, or, some sort of a car accident, or whatever might happen. There could be something. It could be simply that you lose your footing on a stairs and you go down and you break a bone or something like that. Stuff can happen. And so always, whenever you're thinking about your plans for the next 12 months and you're kind of coming up with an investment thesis and you're thinking, this is what I want to do, I'm going to go all in on this. You just have to leave yourself ever so slightly a bit of wriggle room. The wriggle room is there just in case. And take for example, I had a conversation with somebody. I'm trying to remember who it was, but about 3 years ago, I can remember having this conversation with somebody, and he was of the view that we have entered an era of ultra low interest rates. And at the time, we were at about 0%. And so this was kind of like, I believe we are in the era of ultra low interest rates, and I cannot see any circumstance under which interest rates will shoot up. And therefore, I'm going to double down on my investments in a big way. And so that meant going out and leveraging up, borrowing a lot more money and stuff. Now, nobody saw the COVID coming. And as a result of no one seeing COVID coming, nobody saw inflation coming. And with inflation comes interest rate hikes. And I don't remember who this person was, but I can imagine that hypothesis now has a big hole in it. And so you start to wonder, how badly impacted was that person when this took place? Now, so the advice, just in terms of, I'm not suggesting that you can be entirely risk-free. Like when you buy a property, you are embarking on something that is inherently risky. Now, it isn't massively risky because you can rent the property out, you can sell it, you can do all this kind of stuff. But the moment you rent a property out to a tenant, you're at risk. Is that tenant a responsible person? Are they going to pay the rent on time? Are they going to just decide, sorry, I've lost my job, I'm not paying you any rent and you can't kick me out? And next minute you got some sort of a fight on your hands. Or are they the kind of person who's irresponsible and, smokes cigarettes in the house and leaves it on the sofa. Next minute you have a fire in your apartment that you're trying to rent out or something like that. There can be all sorts of risk that has nothing to do with you, but it's nothing that you have control over. You can obviously mitigate it as much as possible by doing all of your checks, making sure that this person, doesn't have a history of any kind of bad behavior or anything. But ultimately, somebody can suddenly go through some sort of a crisis in their own life, and that, ends up impacting your life. And so I always think it is a good idea to just leave yourself at least the tiniest amount of wriggle room in case something goes that's not as part of your plan. If you're thinking, I'm going to buy this property, it's going to take 8 weeks to close the deal. When the deal closes, I'm going to start getting income in straight away. I'll probably rent the house within a few days. I'll get the income in, then that's your plan. But what happens if there's some sort of a delay? What happens if, a lockdown took place in those 8 weeks? What would happen if it just doesn't pan out the way you were expecting? I'm not suggesting that you could end up, losing everything, but it's just, I've seen people making decisions around investment and they make this assumption that everything is going to go like clockwork, that they're going to go in, they're going to refurbish the house and they're going to be in and out in, a month. And the reality is the job drags on for 6 months. And, you asked, I'll tell you, just before Christmas, this is an exact example. We had one of the bathrooms in one of our office buildings. It had a problem and the men's toilets were not working. And so we had a fairly irate tenant who was saying, listen, I've got 70 people working in the building and the men's toilets are not working. Like, what are you going to do about it? And so I said, listen, don't worry. I'll immediately get this sorted. So on the phone to a plumber, and can you come in and get this sorted like right away? Have to have it done, straight away. Promised the earth, yes, we'll be in before the end of the day. No show. So what does that make me look like to the person whose assurances I had given? Makes me look like an idiot. So the next day he's like, I see nothing has been done, Gavin. You assured me that this was going to be, and I was like, listen, the guy promised me he'd be in and he let me down. I'm very sorry, but he tells me he's going to be here today. Sure enough, nothing, didn't show up. A second day. And this is starting to get really problematic now. The guy is getting really irate. And onto the third day. And at this stage, I really wanted to get rid of the plumber and just bring in somebody totally different. But by this stage, the plumber knew what was required. And I thought it'll probably take even longer to replace him with somebody else. So I may as well just let the guy come in and I'll give him a piece of my mind about being 3 days late, but at least we'll get the job done quicker than if I try to hire somebody completely new. That was my thinking. The guy didn't show up a third day, and I ended up going into a Friday with this horrendous sort of email from the tenant, just effectively accusing me of not giving a shit and treating them like dirt. And this is the absolute last thing that's on my mind. I've been shouting at a plumber for days, and I keep on having to let the tenant know that, sorry, but I've been let down again and again and again. And it starts sounding like I'm the one who's bullshitting. And so anyway, long and short of it is, it got sorted and we all kind of made up and stuff like that. But it was very difficult and it was completely outside of my control. Like, this was something I was getting assurances, but and that is what can happen if you embark on, say, an ambitious refurbishment project. You buy a property, you say, right, I'm going to get all of the trades in at the same time. I'm going to get the bang, bing, bing, the whole thing's going to be done. And we'll be earning our first rent check in max 6 weeks. And so you start thinking, okay, I have the money for the first mortgage payment, but the second one will be covered by the rent coming in, and maybe you've got a little bit of wiggle room, and so you go and assume another one. What happens if in the process of doing the work something is uncovered and suddenly you're looking at 4 months of a refurb job instead of 4 weeks? Suddenly you're into missing payments and all sorts of stuff. Like, have you got a little bit of a buffer there just to get you through that? And this is why I mean by just making the assumption that everything is going to go according to plan, that the stars will perfectly align and you'll be in the right place and everything will work out. Doesn't always happen, and stuff comes out of the blue and you're unprepared for it. Now, I think one of the things to just going forward, what is the moral of the story? There's a difference between expectations and intentions. And if you think about it like this, I intend to make 2024 a fantastic year. That's my intention. It's quite different from having an expectation that 2024 is going to be a great year. Expectation means that you're assuming everything's going to go according to plan. Now, you can have an intention that you're going to do your bit and you're going to do as much as you can, but you just don't have total control of the situation. And so it's worth your while just considering, are you kind of assuming that everything is under your control, or are you building in just that little bit, that E for events, where stuff outside of your control can come along and you have little or no control over it? So guys, I hope this one it's a short one this week. I've actually got a whole load of guests coming on next week. I've actually interviewed 4 different guests in the last few weeks. And so you've got tons of great value ahead of us. But I just wanted to start the first of the year with a new episode with just myself and thinking about planning. I have created that momentum program. It's all about having your best year. And we obviously do some of that mindset thinking around events and things like that. But the idea is that you set yourself ambitious goals and you'll have someone like myself to hold you accountable, and lots of strategies, lots of tools around how to achieve that. And if you are interested, I'll put a link in the show notes below. Guys, I'll catch you next week. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Facade. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, please connect with me via the Facebook group that is called Behind the Facade Community. Alternatively, you will find me on social media. My handle is Gavin J. Gallagher. You can stay up to date with all of my content and the various projects I'm working on over on my website, gavinjgallagher.com. And while you're there, please do add your name to the Join My Tribe thing over on the right-hand side. This will ensure you're kept up to date via my weekly newsletter. All of these links are in the show notes below. That's all for now. I will see you guys in the next episode.